Hey guys, welcome to our Earnest Talk. The Importance of Being Earnest is a play by Oscar Wilde.
Yes. We're here today to talk to you about how we feel about the importance of being earnest. I'm Annie.
And I'm Kate. So the play begins when Algernon is waiting for Lady Bracknell and her daughter Gwendolen to arrive at the household, and the butler brings Ernest, aka Jack Worthing, instead, who has recently returned from being at home in the country. Jack tells Algernon that he has come to propose to Gwendolen, and Algernon says Jack cannot marry Gwendolen until he has cleared up the issue with Cicely. The butler brings Jack's cigarette case, which states his name as being Jack. It is revealed that Jack goes by Ernest in town and Jack in the country. Algernon accuses Jack of bunburying, and Cicely Cardew, who is in Jack's care because her grandfather, Thomas Cardew, adopted Jack. Cicely lives with Jack in the country and is being watched by Miss Prism. For an excuse to go to town, Jack came up with his brother Ernest, who often has problems because he wants an excuse to leave his town in the country and doesn't want to be a bad influence on Cicely. Algernon reveals that he has his own Ernest, a man named Bunbury, who is troublesome and frequently ill. Jack states he will no longer use Ernest, but Algernon believes he is still useful.
Then, once Lady Bracknell and Gwendolen arrive, and Algernon tells him he is unable to attend dinner because Bunbury is ill, Algernon and Lady Bracknell go into the music room so Jack can confess his feelings for Gwendolen. Gwendolen states that she feels the same way, and her admiration for those with the name Ernest is very great. Jack worriedly asks if she would still love him if his name was not Ernest, and she pretty much says that she would not, which is kind of a bummer. Jack proposes to Gwendolen, and she accepts the proposal. However, Lady Bracknell decides only her and her father can engage Gwendolen.
Lady Bracknell talks to Jack to learn more about him, and it is revealed that he was an orphan found in a handbag on a train. She states she will not allow Jack to marry Gwendolen and leaves. Jack tells Algernon about the incident and says that he will stop Ernest on a later date. However, Algernon tells Jack that he wishes to meet Cicely, but Jack does not want this to happen because of her young age and her good looks. Gwendolen returns and tells Algie to turn his back. She asks Jack for his address in the country, and Algernon overhears and writes it down. Gwendolen promised to write it to Jack daily and escorts her out. Algernon tells the butler that he will be bunburying tomorrow.
In Act 2, Miss Prism and Cicely discuss Jack's worries about his brother in the garden of his country house. Dr. Chasuble to enter the household.
Miss Prism and Dr. Chasuble return from their walk, and she tries to convince him to get married. Jack enters the garden and is dressed in all black, revealing that his brother Ernest had died in Paris the day before. Jack asks Dr. Chasuble to christen him in the afternoon, and he agrees to do so. Cicely comes to tell Jack that his brother is waiting for him in the room. Jack states that he does not have a brother, and Algernon appears from the house. Jack refuses to shake his hand, and Cicely tells about Ernest's friend named Bunbury, of whom Ernest takes care of. Jack tells the butler to get the dog cart because Ernest has been called out of town. Algernon expressed interest in Cicely, and Jack orders him to leave immediately.
Cicely returns, and the butler tells Algie that the dog cart is ready, but Cicely prevents him from leaving. They tell the butler that the dog cart can come back next week at the same time, and Algernon asks Cicely to marry him. Cicely reveals that they have already been engaged for 3 months, and tells Algernon she loves him because his name is Ernest. After he suggests the name Algernon, Cicely states that she could not love him if that was his name.
Gwendolen arrives to see Jack. Cicely informs her that Jack has gone to see Dr. Chasuble, but takes the time to introduce herself. The two like each other, but Gwendolyn wishes Cecily were not as young and pretty as she is. Gwendolyn believes Cecily is Ernest's ward, but Cecily corrects her, stating that she is Jack's ward and she is planning to marry Ernest. Gwendolyn tells Cecily that she is mistaken and the two compare entries in their diaries. Because Gwendolyn was proposed to before Cecily, she believes she has the prior claim. However, Cecily says that Ernest must have changed his mind.
Jack approaches the girls, and Gwendolyn asks if he is engaged to Cecily. He denies it, and Cecily reveals that he is actually Uncle Jack, not Ernest. Algernon approaches, and Cecily asks if he is engaged to Gwendolyn. He denies that, and Gwendolyn reveals that his name is actually Algernon. The two are angered and embrace each other. The boys tell the truth about who they are, and the women storm off into the house. Jack accuses Algernon of Bunburying, and they argue about who will be called Ernest.
Jack and Algernon return to the house to try and talk to the girls in Act 3. Gwendolyn and Cecily tell them that their actual names must be changed, and the boys reveal that they are being rechristened in the afternoon. The couples make up and embrace.
Lady Bracknell arrives and refuses to let Jack speak to Gwendolyn again. Cecily is introduced to Lady Bracknell, and Algernon reveals that he is engaged to Cecily. She refuses to consent their marriage as well, until she hears that Cecily is very wealthy. But Jack does not consent to Cecily's marriage until she turns 35. Jack states that Algernon is a liar and reflects on the mayhem he had caused over the course of the afternoon. Jack states that in order to consent to Cecily and Algernon's wedding, Lady Bracknell must give consent to his wedding to Gwendolyn. Lady Bracknell continues to refuse. Dr. Chasuble comes to tell Jack and Algernon So, our general thoughts on the importance of being earnest. I don't know. I thought it was a silly one. Thought it was pretty cute. Oscar Wilde did well with this one.
He did indeed.
There was some good humor, lots of satire. Something that I thought was very kind of odd, in my opinion, was how in the end they find out that they're pretty much all related, and yet Jack and Gwendolyn still are engaged even though they're cousins. And
Incest.
Yes, literally.
Incest.
And Algernon and Cecily are engaged even though technically Algernon is Cecily's uncle. So that's what I thought was kind of odd about it.
I don't know about you guys.
I thought it was a little bit difficult at the beginning to keep up with characters because Jack introduced himself as Ernest, and so it was a little bit hard to follow along with, but then you later learn that he just goes by Ernest in town and Jack in the country. So
Quite confusing.
it is quite confusing, but I like the idea of their names being Ernest because it plays with the actual word earnestness, which means being truthful and sincere.
Yep, right there in the title. The importance of being earnest. It's like, the importance of being earnest as in the person, but also the importance of being sincere, which is a big theme in the play.
Oscar Wilde is a very punny guy.
He is a very funny guy.
Another thing in the play that I thought was really interesting was how Algernon and Jack lied to Gwendolyn and Cecily, and they still wanted to get married to them despite the deception. So they both were introduced to a fake character named Ernest, who they claimed they loved because of his name. But then finding out that their names weren't actually Ernest, and they didn't seem to care a whole lot about the lying that was associated with that. Very interesting.
It is very interesting. I think it strongly reflects the values that people hold, especially in this play, because they don't really, I don't know. I don't know. Okay, first of all, with them only being attracted to them because their name is Ernest, that just shows, like, I don't know.
Shallowness.
It shows their shallowness. Like,
Yeah, and Cecily
I
and
don't know.
Algernon, the first time they met, they got engaged.
Yeah.
Also, the proposals of Algernon and Cecily and Jack and Gwendolyn reveal the social standards and how they can prevent you from being with the person that you love, which is a lot different now. Lady Bracknell said that she would not allow Algernon to get married without the consent of her or his father, and the same went for Gwendolyn, so she didn't want the couples to get married at first, and then after learning that Cecily had a lot of wealth, then she wanted to get married to him. So, or vice versa, then he wanted to get married to her.
And something that really ties into that is, like, even in the beginning when Lady Bracknell learned that Jack wanted to be married to Gwendolyn, when she learned of his proposal to her, she really saw Jack as, like, something that would possibly take down Gwendolyn if he didn't fit this certain standard. Like, the questions that she asked him were all, like, focused around his wealth, his social standing, his image in the public. She even says an engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be.
Also, it shows how important wealth is in a marriage at that time as well, because Lady Bracknell was willing to marry off her daughter to a man that she knew little about, just so Algernon can have a wealthy wife. The need for Algernon and Jack to come up with the faked character of Ernest and Bunbury kind of shows how important it was for people to be doing the things that they said they're going to do, and also following the morals of society at that time. So if they wanted out of a dinner party at that time, they could just say that they had to deal with Bunbury or Ernest, and then they would automatically get out because they had an excuse. So rather than canceling, saying, hey, don't really feel like going, they had to have that excuse in order to leave.
And they would really use these lies so often, and they just resort to being ingenuine and not truthful and not earnest very much. Jack even tells Algernon that the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl, when Jack confronts him about telling Cecily about his true identity. And that's pretty troublesome, I think. And it shows that, I don't know, Algernon doesn't really care about, like, the basis of his relationships because he's not worried about what the consequences would be, probably because he's seen before that it's not really something that people value.